What football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Hey, Sam.
What's up, Steve?
I'm back.
You are.
This is awesome. It's great to be back.
You're clean.
Look, I've been clean for a while. They tried to keep me out. They were trying to keep me out of the building, Sam.
They were, yeah. Yeah.
They wouldn't let. I'm not letting it happen. I'm
Okay.
back. PFF NFL podcast. Week 2 is in the books. How you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Awesome.
It's very early in the morning.
Feel good.
At the
It's
moment.
very early.
That's why I have, coffee is required.
This is real energy, though. I got a lot of takes.
Well, yeah, you've been quarantined and kept away for a while. You've been building it up.
Well, I'm ready. I'm recovered. Virus has been shed. We're ready to go. So let's get through. I might have week 1 and week 2 takes. I have to combine them into one.
We don't have that kind of time, Steve.
All right, well, let's roll through. Week 2 is in the books. We're going to go game by game through all of it. Let's start with Thursday Night Football, Cincinnati Bengals and Cleveland Browns. Thursday night always feels like it was so far away.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good game, though. I thought the Cleveland Browns, especially offensively, looked like what we were expecting them to be this year. Last week against the Baltimore Ravens, not as clean. It wasn't the type of offense we expected. Baker Mayfield, one of his better games in a while, and Joe Burrow continues to improve and at least give some hope for Bengals fans.
Yeah, I was weirdly excited about this game before the game. Like, I think a lot of people looked at it on paper and were like, Browns-Bengals, Thursday night, like this is not the game you want to get yourself excited for the weekend, on Thursday. I thought this looked kind of interesting on paper, and it sort of panned out that way. I was texting you during the game, some way midway through the first or second quarter, maybe. It's like, we might get good Baker tonight. And we did right up until he threw the dumb interception.
Yeah, the one bad pick.
Right. And the pick was bad. There's no excuses for it. It goes down as a significant negative in PFF's grading. But those are plays that happen, right? Quarterbacks make that mistake. It's not, I don't think that in and of itself is like a giant indictment of Baker's play. It's an issue. And also, I didn't notice until like the second time through, but he had to avoid a free rusher on his right-hand side before he delivered the pass. So I suspect if his eyes got pulled to the right away from the corner that he had to check on the left before he let fly. Again, I can understand how that happens. But to me, way more encouraging was what he was doing, like structurally. Stayed in the pocket way more than he usually does. You could see him fighting it at times, like mentally. There were times where he clearly wanted to bounce from the pocket and then sort of forced himself to stay, to reset and deliver the pass. But he basically showed that A, he can still do that, and B, when he does, the accuracy comes back. Like when he isn't running for his life, trying to do crazy stuff outside the pocket, he's still capable of standing there and putting the ball exactly where it needs to be. He's still a fundamentally accurate quarterback. Now, week 1, I think you almost have to say it's the Ravens, he had no shot, throw it out. Week 2, you almost have to go all the way to the other side and go, it's the Bengals. Of course he was going to look okay. Let's throw that out. Week 3, I think, is where you get a better idea of where in the middle of those two extremes he actually is, because week 3 they face Washington, who have at least a legit defensive line. He should be under some kind of pressure. But given the opposition, I think that's as encouraged as you can be for Baker Mayfield.
That's my takeaway with a lot of the reactions and overreactions through 2 weeks. You have to put in perspective who has been played and how the schedule has played out. The encouraging part, I think, for the Browns offense, 41% play action rate, just kind of getting into the system we expected. They did not do that in week 1.
Yeah.
The two-headed monster of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt was outstanding. Forced 9 missed tackles on that game. In that game against the Bengals. To your point, though, the Bengals looked a little soft up front and on both lines, really. Put Joe Burrow in empty sets, so 5 wide, which a lot of people look at and they think, well, that's difficult for pass protection. It's not necessarily, because you're going to get the ball out quickly. It actually protects the line a little bit. unless you're the Bengals, though, because as soon as there was like a sixth rusher and any sort of, confusion up front by the defense, there's confusion on the offensive line. So Burrow, I think, a lot of people were talking about it during the game. Impressed, right? Be excited, Bengals fans. The dude's taking hits, making big plays. He missed some throws. He did his usual stuff, but I think overall got to be encouraged by his performance.
Yeah, you have to, whether or not he's the total package right now in terms of overall grade and all those kinds of things, you have to like the poise that he's showing. And, for Baker Mayfield got put in a great situation and showed that he can still play at a high level. Burrow is not in a good situation. I mean, his receivers are okay, but the line is giving him problems. He's in a hole, asked to drop back and pass 64 times, counting nullified plays. Like, that's a horrible space to be. And he's still back there dealing without making, hideous plays left and right. Like, he's playing pretty well given the circumstances. So that's encouraging.
Crazy stat line. The official stats, 37 for 61 for only 316 yards.
Yeah.
So that's 5.2 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns. AJ Green looks off.
He did, although, I mean, he was, for most of that game, he was being covered by Denzel Ward, who's one of the better man cover guys in the, like, there was one catch that he made where Ward broke it up like twice and it still landed in his hands. Like,
right.
I mean, he didn't look great, but that's as tough an assignment as he's going to draw in terms of a man-to-man cover guy. So I wouldn't read too much into it.
I think moving forward, Bengals try to keep Burrow healthy, continue to have some optimism, find some playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. Cleveland, though, they still feel like one of those mid-tier teams that in any given week can be difficult and dangerous. They have their own issues, I think, on the back end, though, and that'll determine their season. Let's go to the Packers and Lions. And the Packers are looking strong through 2 weeks. And the Lions, who were supposed to, they're part of our, one of our underdog darlings if you have enough time in the offseason to talk yourself into it.
Yeah.
We did that with the Lions, and it is not looking good so far.
Yeah, a huge amount of that, though, was like if Matthew Stafford plays in 2020 the way he was playing in 2019 before he went down. Right. My argument against that was always, but there's a lot of what he was doing that seemed unsustainably, good and or aggressive on the end of certain spectrums, like average depth of target. If he'd extended that throughout the season, it would have been, I think, the highest average depth of target we've ever seen over like a full season of a pass-heavy quarterback. So that's probably not going to happen the second year in a row. Like, it just isn't. And so far it isn't. And if he doesn't play like that, they're not as good as people were expecting them to be. On the other hand, Aaron Rodgers might be.
Yeah.
So I don't think Rodgers looked quite as good as he looked in week one, on the basis that I think in week one he was basically unplayable.
Just didn't miss.
Right. Like, week one Aaron Rodgers was like peak Aaron Rodgers. That's as good as he ever plays and ever has played, which is as good as any quarterback we've ever seen play the game, right? Like, that's up there with peak Mahomes, with peak Brady, peak Manning. Like, that's as good as it gets. Week two wasn't that, but it wasn't like all the way back to, okay, he's the guy we've seen for the last few years. Through 2 weeks, Aaron Rodgers is back, like the real MVP caliber Aaron Rodgers, and that changes the entire balance of power in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the biggest thing with Rodgers. Starting in 2015, the easy stuff just wasn't there, right? I mean, again, it's easy to just put on a highlight reel and say, this guy's awesome. Rodgers has the highlight reel over the last couple of years. High percentage of big-time throws, low percentage of turnover-worthy throws. The difference for Rodgers since that, he had the 2016 stretch and his 2014 MVP season, the difference since then has been the quote-unquote easy stuff, right? Just accuracy on short area stuff, finding guys over the middle of the field, all of that stuff. I mean, that has been on point in these first 2 games, So I don't think, when you talk about like Rodgers' regression the last couple of years statistically, it was the fact that he just wasn't nearly as consistent for his, say, 40 dropbacks per game, 35 dropbacks per game, even though he still has the special in him. He has now reined that back in and been excellent. And then you have Aaron Jones in the backfield, 75-yard touchdown run in there. For a team that does it, this is what's more impressive though too with Rodgers. It's a team that doesn't have great playmakers, right? Just on paper, beyond Davante Adams is special, and we've talked about the value of having that one guy to carry a receiving core, but he's helping to develop the other guys. And MVS works, Valdez-Scantling works. the deep game extremely well, so you're going to get some chunk plays, but he's going to drop passes. You have Robert Tonyan being his tight end threat. I mean, Rodgers is doing a good job of developing these other playmakers that, on paper, the Packers didn't do a really good job of surrounding him with talent.
Yeah, baptism by fire for Jeffrey Okudah yesterday, just put in a blender by Davante Adams.
He did, he was.
But it's a great example of how stats can lie sometimes, right? Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford have very similar box score numbers coming out of this game. But one of them was dealing with 7 drops, and one of them was dealing with 3. Now, 2 of them were on nullified plays for Rodgers, so they didn't count. But like those massively change what you expect in terms of outcomes and PFF grading as well. Also, obviously, Stafford had the pick 6 and another turnover-worthy play in there as well. Rodgers had none because Rodgers, when he's playing well, just doesn't turn the ball over. So those, even though the numbers are very, very similar, I think the performance definitely wasn't. And Rodgers, through 2 games, has been getting let down a lot by those receivers. The guys that we have been talking about for a while as not helping him out. They're still not really helping him out, with the exception of Davante Adams, but he's proven that he doesn't need it. This great debate about which was the bigger problem, Rodgers or the lack of help. He's showing through 2 games that like when he's at his best, he doesn't need the help. Right? And it's tough, right? Because in theory, anytime your receivers aren't great and they're not helping out the quarterback and they're making him worse, it's a problem. But Rodgers is one of those few transcendent quarterbacks that doesn't actually need it. If he had it, it would be great. But he's shown before he doesn't actually require it to be great. And that's still there. Again, like that was the debate, is that part of him still there, or has he become a quarterback that is not transcendent anymore? And so far, the answer is no, he's still capable of it.
So far, looking good. Yeah, for sure. And 5 drop passes in there. To your point, it could be even better.
Yeah.
My weekly QB article that I wrote starting last week, I gave him the best incompletion of the week. So, I mean, he hit Valdez-Scantling about 45 yards down the field right in his hands.
Week 1, Valdez-Scantling cost him like 100-plus yards for 2 drops.
He'll also be there on the receiving end of a deep ball or 2 per game, creating chunk plays. But, man, there's more out there for Rodgers and this Packers offense. For the Lions, pivotal year for Matt Patricia, a defense that hasn't been good over the last couple of years. Part of my optimism was with the receiving core, with having a Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola. Golladay hasn't played. Just that has not panned out. And you mentioned Stafford's pick 6. Just a poor, late, under pressure decision, laying it out there to the flat that, the Packers week in, week out, always feel like they, whether it's a Jair Alexander, that was Chandon Sullivan with the pick 6. They're one of those teams that is, I always say, capable of putting together good defensive performances on the back end. And again, I think that's what makes the Packers difficult. You can't bank on defense week in, week out, but they've got a pretty good group of guys in the secondary that can give them a shot every single week.
Like I say, Rodgers, if he's back to being MVP caliber Rodgers, that changes the entire balance of power in the NFC, because the Packers go from a team that at 13-3 a year ago, I think overachieved what their performance suggested they should have had. And I think there was a notable gap between them and the very best teams in the NFL, like the 49ers, as we saw in the NFC Championship game. But if you ran it back and replaced the Rodgers they had last year with the guy that showed up through 2 weeks, it's a different conversation. Like, they go from being an overachieving 13-3 team to probably exactly where they should be, and easily the match of a team like the 49ers, because they now have a massive disparity in their favorite quarterback. Like, you can argue that their offseason didn't make them any better, but if Rodgers went from being 2019 Aaron Rodgers to Super Bowl, or to 2011 MVP Aaron Rodgers, that's the single biggest upgrade they could make by a mile. Like, it catapults them into a completely different area.
Yeah, obviously, if he's playing at that level, they're up there. Just like the Russell Wilson level in Seattle, which we'll get to. Let's go to Miami and Buffalo, Sam. Josh Allen looking fantastic overall. Still got away with a couple turnover-worthy plays. That's for the people that say they can't give Josh Allen full credit. I'm going to give him full credit. Okay. He's looking really good.
You just didn't give him full credit.
I was just stating facts.
Well, that's not allowed. You can't do that. The Bills people don't let you state the facts. They are all or nothing. And if you don't, and also silence is an admission of guilt. If you don't immediately come out and praise him for anything he does good, you're part of the problem.
I don't want to be guilty, so I am praising Josh Allen right now. He's doing well. I mean, look, I would say statistically he's ridiculous right now.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of what we were expecting coming in, which is this plethora of playmakers is going to elevate Josh Allen's game. But also to his credit, he has thrown the ball more accurately. The week 1 game, again, there were just enough plays in a game where to hold his grade down that they're still going to be angry. When the grades come out, when the grades are finalized, people are still going to be a little mad, I think. Even after week 1, he fumbled twice in week 1. He threw what should have been a pick on the goal line in week 1. He's had a couple questionable decisions yesterday. But as far as when he came out, the chunk plays that you could see him creating with his arm, he's starting to make those. He's playing confidently, and he's got guys getting open for him. And in a turn of events, it's not the Bills' defense that's winning games; it's the Bills' offense that's winning games. And Allen has been a catalyst there, also with his rushing ability in there as well.
Yesterday against the Dolphins, he was phenomenal in the fourth quarter as well, which is it's always an interesting way of the game presenting itself. This is kind of the Andrew Luck thing, right? It was how much praise do you give a guy for putting out the fire that he started in the first place? Now, this isn't that because Allen wasn't bad for the first 3 quarters of the game, but it's
look at you complimenting him.
When you turn it on in the fourth quarter, it skews perception of what you did, I think, to a degree. But what's really interesting to me is that he's won in different ways through 2 weeks. Like the first week, we spent all offseason saying if he can just figure out how to connect on those deep passes more, then it's a completely different conversation. He's a massive, because if he goes from being bad at the most valuable plays in football as a quarterback to being okay, it's like the biggest leap forward you can make. It's huge. And week 1, they didn't. But so week 1, what they did is they were like, well, he can't hit those deep passes, so let's just not attempt any. Let's focus on the areas of the field where he's actually better already, and things are better. Week 2, though, he was connecting on the deep shot. Right. Week 3, he hit a bunch of those. So that, I think, is really encouraging that he's done it in a couple of different ways. I don't think the Stephon Diggs, John Brown, those guys coming in doesn't make him a more accurate passer deep down the field, but it's got to help your confidence level, and it gives you a greater margin for error. At
the same time, though, he wasn't going to complete 20% again. You know what I mean? No. He wasn't going to complete a ridiculously low percentage.
Right. But even the late shot to John Brown was a deep down the field was a perfect example. That was an underthrown ball, but he was so wide open that they had just enough time for it to be complete and make it into a big play, right? But the point is, he's throwing catchable balls now, not ones that sail 10 yards over the guy's head, and there's nothing he could do to give him a shot. I would be encouraged. Now, again, what we just said with Baker Mayfield, right? You have to put some kind of context into who he's played.
Oh, boy.
And through 2 weeks, we've played the Jets and the Dolphins, who are going to be 2 of the worst teams in the NFL. Now, it's not like it makes it meanishless, but...
Why are you tearing him down? Why did the schedule makers set this up perfectly so that they could get some Josh Allen hype? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying... It doesn't make any sense to not be aware of the context, right? If you're going to look at Baker Mayfield and say, yeah, you have to be encouraged by what he did, but let's be real, it was the Bengals. Let's wait a week until we crown him. I think you got to do the same thing for Josh Allen and say he played really well yesterday. That's one of his better games. Through 2 weeks, he's looked really good. Now, not as good as the silly stats that people are putting out there that through 2 weeks, there's a name of Josh Allen, Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes, and somebody else in the Hall of Fame. Right.
All from their 50 touchdown seasons.
Exactly, right. So if you're pulling that out and saying this is who he is this season, that's silly, right? That isn't it. So he's not playing that well, but he's playing well.
Yeah.
But the point is, you can't just do it in a vacuum. You have to at least acknowledge that the Jets suck and the Dolphins aren't good.
Byron Jones limited to only 4 snaps yesterday.
Right.
Oh, Sam, you just can't give credit where. Let's just get it on the record.
Uh-huh.
Has Josh Allen played well through 2 games?
Yes.
There you go. Come on back, Bills fans.
And more
Come back
to the point,
and join us.
Played well as a passer. Taken steps forward, improve things that he wasn't good at a year ago. Again, so this is the intriguing thing about Josh Allen is for a boom or bust prospect, I guess, his development has been like remarkably consistent and short-stepped.
He has continued to get better,
but not just
in
like
certain areas.
Yeah, not just sort of giant leap here, giant leap here. It's been like short, small baby steps the whole way for this remarkably consistent, slow upward trajectory. Like I don't know. You assume that a guy that's sort of all toolsy and boom or bust will, go either all in one direction or all in the other and very quickly. But he's actually just steadily had this slow improving career arc. It's kind of interesting to watch.
I would say also credit the Bills as well. When we talk about a pass first approach, they're taking a pass first approach. They're putting him in. They're passing when they should in favorable situations. They're doing a good job there. They absolutely did that in week 1 against the Jets. It's the opposite of teams that feel like, well, I've got this young quarterback, I need to protect him, we're going to run, pass, and try to get into favorable third downs. They're doing a really good job of attacking. So Buffalo Bills, the leaders in the AFC East, the sole leaders at 2-0. Let's go to the Minnesota Vikings and the Indianapolis Colts. Man, 28-11. The Colts just pretty much dominated. I mean, it was a crazy game because Kirk Cousins at one point has a stat line with a 0 passer rating.
Yeah, got it all the way back to 15 by the end of the game.
And even when you say, look, there was a Hail Mary in there as one of those interceptions. I think our friend Arif he's like, look, you got to take that out. If you take that out, his passer rating's 13, so you're good.
You're fine then.
Again, Cousins' passing grade isn't going to be nearly as bad as that passer rating, but he's putting the ball in harm's way a little bit too much, sprinkling in some big-time throws. This is just not how the Minnesota Vikings want to play football.
No. I mean, this is a great example of the context thing we've just been talking about, right? Week one, the Packers wrecked the Vikings, and you're left not really knowing what happened, right? Was Aaron Rodgers amazing? Do the Vikings suck? Or is it something, or is it both, right? And week 2 was a chance to answer that on both sides. Aaron Rodgers comes in and plays really well again, so we're at least, you can't be 100% confident, but that reinforces your original thought that Rodgers played amazingly in week 1. He might be all the way back. And the Colts game did the same thing for the Vikings. It reinforced the fact that this defense is not good. It's got problems. And overall, I think this is an example now of the Vikings have just reached tipping point of this. The talent level on this roster has been slowly eroding since that 2017 season where they were basically all in for Super Bowl.
Right.
And it's just reached tipping point where it's now like it's critical mass. It's a problem. They can't overcome the fact that there just isn't that much talent on this roster.
I mean, that was the bottom line, right? It was this weird dynamic of they had to rebuild. They were in rebuilding mode, and they re-upped Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
And Kirk Cousins, our description of Kirk Cousins is the complete opposite. It's like, if you have everything nice around him, particularly playmakers, system, scheme, all that stuff, the guy can make some throws, and he can put up some good numbers as he has throughout most of his career. He's always had pretty much a good supporting cast, except maybe one year at Washington. He had to drag some receivers along, had a bad offensive line, 2017 maybe. But now we're seeing the rebuild in the secondary for the Vikings. That's, I think, the biggest issue. The reliance on Holton Hill and Mike Hughes and Jeff Gladney. He struggled yesterday, the rookie. I think it's more just it's going to take some time. So you've got a rebuilding team with a veteran, high-paid quarterback in Kirk Cousins, and I think in the NFL right now, that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, we said this at draft time. They had a great draft, but if you're leaving yourself in a position where you need 2 or 3 rookie starters to come in and play like established veterans that aren't a problem, you're immediately behind the 8 ball because the chances of 3 of those guys panning out year 1 is tiny. Like you might hit it long term and 3 of the guys pan out. Even that is a pretty low percentage play. To expect all of them to hit the ground running in the first year of action is just not going to happen. One encouraging thing I think for their defense is that Ngakoue looked a lot better week 2 than he did when he was just brick walled against David Bakhtiari in week 1. They need him to be legit along with getting Donnell Hunter back, and suddenly you've got a little bit of help up front. Now at least you've got 2 sources of pressure, even if there's not much else. Because that secondary, they're not going to take giant leaps forward all by themselves. one thing that could help is if you suddenly find a source of pass rush up front and start limiting the amount of time you're expecting those guys to cover. But overall, yeah, it's a major issue.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did they pressure Aaron Rodgers in Week 1? They only got to 7 yesterday with on Phillip Rivers, and that's the point I wanted to make about Phillip Rivers. Now, I don't want the Colts are still a dangerous team. I think we tend to just see 1 week performance and maybe write them off, but the Colts are still extremely dangerous in the AFC South. Phillip Rivers in Week 1, the Colts moved the ball up and down the field left and right. Rivers made a ton of good throws. It was like 3 throws did him in, right? 3 turnover-worthy throws that were just poor, and that was essentially the game, right? He didn't have those yesterday, and they're still spreading the ball around. Sorry about the table. I'm rusty on the way back here, trying to stay comfortable here. You got new chairs. You changed everything on me.
I didn't do anything. I just sat down. No, I sat in the other chair. I guess I did that.
You sat on this side?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, not voluntarily. I came into the studio. Mike was sitting here, so what am I going to do?
What a terrible
Kick him
podcast.
out?
The people were not happy. They'll be excited to see me back. You think? Don't you think?
Sure.
I think our fans.
Yeah.
Anyway, what Phillip Rivers is getting clean pockets. I mean, he is literally like 2 plays away from a pretty pristine first 2 weeks of action, right? With the Colts.
That was the weird thing about Week 1. It's like he kind of did what they expected him to do. Like they dropped back to pass a lot, and overall he did really well. It's just that he had 2 really bad decisions in there. And it's like part of the thing is, if you're going to be the sort of established veteran quarterback that's the difference between us winning and losing, you really can't throw 2 hideous interceptions.
Yeah, I'm not giving him a pass, but it was another pretty clean game for him yesterday, 19 of 25. And again, he's been pressured 13 times in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the second quarter with the Chargers.
Right. That part is holding up beautifully. The idea that he's behind the best offensive line he's ever been behind in his career, which can only help.
Mo Alley-Cox, the big playmaker, with 111 receiving yards. A lot of fantasy folks were like, hey, get in on Mo Alley-Cox, as the Colts don't trot any tight ends out there, and look at him coming through with 111 yards. Jonathan Taylor becomes the bell cow with 26 carries for 101. For whatever that's worth, I believe he's going to produce behind that Colts offensive line.
Of course he is. I mean, for fantasy purposes, it was like whoever gets the carries behind that Colts offensive line is going to have massive success. The problem is it doesn't look like they're going to pick one of these guys between Taylor and Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack goes down Week 1 and answers the question for everybody. Like, now that's Jonathan Taylor's gig. He's going to have a huge season because that offensive line is monstrous. Did you see a play where like Quentin Nelson just drove the defensive line, like all of it, into the end zone?
He's the best.
Yeah, that rushing game is going to have a ton of success, which can only help Phillip Rivers.
All right, Denver Broncos and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I gotta say, after Drew Lock gets hurt, Jeff Driscoll comes in. Jeff Driscoll continues to kind of impress me for a backup. I had low expectations. I had such low expectations.
There was a play
I know there's some bad stuff in there.
On goal to go, he took a sack, and I genuinely think that every single part of his progression was wide open at the time.
But also, 3 big-time throws. They dropped a bunch of passes. Look, I'm just saying he's impressed me because I followed him. Can I even? I can't show what's on this thing.
Why not?
Oh shoot!
Not without hitting the mic.
Logo issues. I can't show what that is.
You think we're going to get sued by?
Yeah, the people are going to sue us. I watched him through his Florida career.
Yeah.
I never expected him to ever even take snaps in the NFL. So good for him. But the Steelers.
That play, by the way, was amazing, right? Because I was focusing on the first guy that was wide open, and then when they reviewed, they replayed, they're like, oh, you can't take that sack, and then it was like, look how mad KJ Hamler is standing in the back of the end zone with nobody within 10 yards of him. Like, that was the second progression over here somewhere, and I don't know what he was doing, but dude, Drew Lock is going to be out for up to 6 weeks. We are stuck with Jeff Driscoll at quarterback for Denver for up to 6 weeks.
Maybe they might have to make a move. They might need to do something. I'm not saying he's great or good. I'm just saying the fact that he's taking NFL snaps, I respect that.
Okay.
Steelers continue. Look at Tyson Alu with a potentially monster grade once they get finalized, and TJ Watt continuing his trajectory to potential, defensive player of the year status.
I mean, he had a good case last year, so if he can back that up, he's in the conversation. But the takeaway from last week or this week, the injuries. How many people went down?
Yeah,
this is the irony of 2020, right? Coming into the season, it's like, wow, well, let's see how badly COVID derails the NFL season. Apparently, the NFL is going to sail straight through the COVID storm without any problem, but everybody is going to be hurt by the end of it.
Well, I think we
missing ACLs and Achilles and all kinds of stuff.
But I think we got through training camp pretty clean compared to previous years, too. Because remember, usually our August podcast, we're like, man, this is sad. We're not going to see this guy. We're not going to see that guy. We didn't have that nearly as much this year. It's just kind of been pushed to the regular season because there's more live action now. So yeah, the injury stuff is. But it's going to be attrition this year.
I mean, what the hell do I know? But it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it's a response to no preseason and a weird training camp, right? Like these aren't soft tissue injuries where
there are a bunch of hamstrings and things like
so
that.
So those things maybe, but like people aren't popping Achilles and ACLs left and right because they didn't have 4 preseason games to warm up.
No, I get
this is just weird. But the number of guys that are going down is ridiculous.
Big Ben had an up and down game, couple turnover-worthy plays in there. Nice touchdown to Deontay Johnson. What do you make? And then Chase, just an absolute dime to Chase Claypool for the 80-plus yard touchdown. That I described Claypool coming out of the draft as, for the Steelers' current receiving core, a perfect number 3, number 4. Like he's just going to add a little vertical threat. Now he's been even better than I expected. He had the beautiful catch on Monday Night Football. Had that, deep ball right there. He might be stealing. He might be what you wanted James Washington to be for this offense.
And James Washington isn't like he hasn't disappeared either. Like he's made some plays. I mean, that grown man drive into the end zone on Monday Night Football.
That was nice. Impressive. That was really nice.
Suddenly, the Steelers, their ability to draft receivers is just nuts.
Yeah.
Like every single one of those guys looks like he actually adds some value to this team. None of them was drafted ahead of the first round or in the first round. Like they're all lower round guys that everybody else had a chance at least once. And yet they have this fascinating balance to the group, right? You've got Deontay Johnson, who's the Antonio Brown slick route runner. You've got Chase Claypool, who's that big vertical threat. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's the slot body, but also has some skills. And then James Washington, who's vertical, has got some strength, a little bit of a tweener between a couple of the different skill sets. But they've got everything in that group, and all of them are young. All of them appear to be talented and capable of making some plays. And, Ben Roethlisberger might not be all the way back to his best ever play, but like that's a receiving core he can work with and they can do damage with.
Yeah, we saw it on Monday night and then even yesterday. Like there'll be some misses in there. Roethlisberger's accuracy was all over the place. Then he kind of settled down in his debut yesterday. Like I said, a couple bad decisions in there. But the thing that gives the Steelers the high upside, I guess, as a team is that in any given week, first off, Ben's going to be aggressive. He's going to play to the strengths of those receivers and give them opportunities to make plays. And then they've got this defense that's at least capable. I think that makes them one of the biggest threats in the AFC.
Yeah.
To take on the Chiefs, to take on the Ravens, right? They've got this front seven that could rush the passer. The secondary's been a little up and down so far, through 2 weeks, but they're solid. And they were outstanding last year. So I think the Steelers, 2-0 and one of the biggest threats. Again, context, right? They played the Giants, they played the Broncos with Jeff Driscoll, but I think that's also they're doing what I expected them to do, I think, this year with Big Ben back at the helm. So let's move on to Jacksonville and Tennessee. Another one of those division games that just, you see it every year, twice. It doesn't look great on paper. Oh, great, Jaguars and Titans. What a game. Minshew is still not, tankable.
Yeah.
He's just going to keep them in so many games.
Somebody called us out on this, or us, me.
What'd you do, man?
Well, maybe not so much me. Me and Mike. My point is, they didn't call you out because you weren't here.
What did
right?
Mike do?
So I can't remember who. Collectively, myself and Mike were called out. You were not because you're innocent of this.
I'm never called out.
But we made that point, right? That Minshew is untankable, and that was the narrative coming out of week one. Is it time to start giving him some more credit than that and say, all right, how good can he actually be? Because we've been working on the basis that, look, this guy is too good for you to tank and get the number 1 overall pick and get Trevor Lawrence, but not good enough to actually be of like any use to you as a franchise going forward, right? If he is your quarterback, you have a ceiling at which you need to have that 2017 around him. Otherwise, you're not going to win a Super Bowl. Is he better than that?
Yeah, I think he might be. I think it's just a matter, for me, it's just I need more data. I just need more information. Because even his entire career, like he went from a nothing at East Carolina to really good at Washington State. Probably the best Washington State quarterback that Mike Leach trotted out there. The best season that we've seen from a Mike Leach quarterback since we started grading in 2014. Don't pull Connor Halliday. I can read your eyes. You missed me so much
Just
that
saying.
I know exactly what you're saying.
That Connor season was
Halliday, 2014, before Luke Falk took over. So last year, the most impressive thing about Minshew last year is the fact that they had nothing around him.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, you helped develop DJ Chark. And I know I'm talking a lot about this quarterback and bringing receivers along and just that connection. But like when you have nothing on paper like Jacksonville had last year, O-line, receivers, and you play as well as Minshew did, and in the things that I wrote in like my preseason QB article, where does he need to improve this year? Like, just don't take as many sacks and don't fumble late in the down. Like, as far as throwing the ball, he was one of the best in the league throwing the ball 10 plus yards down the field last year. The thing that you're saying about the ceiling is that like he just doesn't have a cannon. You know, like when you see Cam Newton and Mahomes and some of these guys that just have great arm talent and velocity and they could throw off platform and they could do all this stuff, it does give you like a bigger margin for error. But I think Minshew's made that work with anticipation, with pocket movement. I've been incredibly impressed with him.
Same, but the lack of a cannon, I don't think. So I originally thought that would be his ceiling, or that would be the thing that caps his progress, right? Is that ultimately he has a limit to his physical tools, and that's the thing that's going to hold him down because it buys you have less margin for error and yada, 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 right? But I don't know that that's actually what caps him right now. I think what caps him now is that point you made before, which is, you know, still holds on to it too long, gets himself into trouble, and causes some plays that he can't dig his way out of. Now, the problem with that is, stylistically, he also leans into that, and in a sort of Russell Wilson style of, and Deshaun Watson and Ryan Fitzpatrick and those quarterbacks, right? He plays into that and gets himself out of a lot of problems by doing that, right? Like there was a play yesterday where he got himself in trouble, bounced around the pocket, reverse course, and like did that whole thing where you get yourself into trouble, start going in a circle in the pocket, then come out the back of the pocket, and you're like, oh, you're screwed now. Like, there's no way. And then he ends up looping all the way around and getting scrambles out for a first down, right? Now, in order for you to accept that that is a play that's okay to make or that is a good thing, you have to buy into a lot of negative that comes with that, right? Like most of the time where you do that, it's going to end badly. And where is the balance, right? With Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, well, certainly Russell Wilson, there's an argument to be made about Deshaun Watson. You're definitely better off letting them do that, right? Because the net win is so great. Most quarterbacks, it's not, right? Like Fitzpatrick, I don't know that it's a net win letting him do that, but it's him, right? So there's no changing it now. But my point is, like that, accepting that that's what he does is not necessarily a good thing. It's just, this is the guy, that's what you get when you have Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now with the Jags, that's currently who Minshew is, but I don't know if it's a great thing that you want to be encouraging and leaning into, because that, I think, at the moment for him is probably a net negative. And if you're going to bridge that gap between being good and, you know, encouraging and now we're excited for your upside to being really good and we can build around you and you're the franchise quarterback of the future, either he needs to change the balance of the result of those plays, and there's a lot more positives that come out of them than negatives, or he needs to wean himself off the tendency to do that.
You know what weans you off of that?
No.
I think.
Okay. What do you got?
A Jamar Chase. You know, like another top receiver. You know what I mean?
So,
but this is where
those guys are just. I don't know that an elite receiver changes that. Like those guys just. That's how they play. Because
that's the tough part about quarterback analysis sometimes, because it's like there's 40 plays in a game. So you're trying to describe a quarterback in 40. Like you just described a handful of plays out of the 40 in a given game, right? So you say like we talked about Jimmy Garoppolo last year. Quick release and good decision maker other than those two, other than those three. Yeah. So I think that's where supporting cast comes in. If you had another receiver, a Jamar Chase, if they added a Jerry Jeudy, if they added a guy that's going to get open quickly and you just steal some of those late plays by just another open receiver within structure, that's what I think makes Minshew scary. You have DJ Chark, who's a nice deep threat, and you've got Tyler Eifert still stumbling out there, and he's throwing these nice seam routes to him for touchdowns and all that. But man, if you gave him another receiver that he's never had, what's Minshew going to do?
I mean, I guess, yeah, stylistically, we have evidence of that this year in terms of Deshaun Watson, right? Like he had Nuke Hopkins, and now you take that away, and suddenly everything that he was already doing looks like a bigger problem because there's no Nuke. Yeah. He doesn't have the safety blanket, and he actually has to find the open guy, and suddenly he's a lot less efficient doing that because he doesn't have that safety blanket.
So that's where, bottom line for the Jaguars, like I would rather have Trevor Lawrence, but every week.
That's not on the table anymore. Like Trevor Lawrence is not happening.
I'm just saying, that's what people were looking at coming into the season, right? But I think you have to look at Minshew over the last year plus and say, with the depleted roster, he's looked very impressive. What happens if he did have a better supporting cast built around him? On the other side, this was like 2019 Titans.
Yeah.
Tannehill's just not missing. Jonnu Smith's creating plays. Corey Davis catching touchdowns. Adam Humphries. Some of those. That Tannehill to Adam Humphries touchdown, under pressure, arm getting hit, puts it on point in the end zone. Just incredible.
Can I tell you what I thought was the most impressive part about that play? The throw was great, but did you see the replay where Humphries is running across the field, knowing that he's about to be targeted, has the presence of mind to take his eyes off the ball that I'm pretty sure is already in the air at this point, look into the end zone to figure out where the defensive backs are and what's going to hit him as this car crash converges around him, looks back to find the ball, catches it, and spins away from the contact that's coming into him because he now knows it's coming and completes the catch. Like, I don't know that you would ever coach a guy to take his eye off the ball in the air, and I certainly would never do it. But the fact that he did that to establish where all the moving pieces were, still got his eyes back to make the catch, and because he got the extra bit of information, was able to sort of brace for contact in a way that I don't think he would have done otherwise, was really kind of impressive.
Yeah, that's NFL players do some crazy things.
Right?
That was impressive. The Titans, do we put their stuff into context too? Broncos and Jaguars were their two teams. As much as we're talking about Minshew, the Jags are still they're two Phillip Rivers bad decisions away from looking at that defense and saying they've given up a lot.
Well, so yeah, Titans are interesting to me through 2 weeks because all through the offseason it was, well, they're going to run it back, right? Everything they did was basically just reset and go again, right? And my point all offseason was that feels like a bad way of doing it because what they did last year seemed incredibly unsustainable. Now, some of that has come true, but some of it looks like it actually is going to run itself back. The Tannehill thing, so the argument was always Tannehill's going to take a massive step, or going to take a step back next year. The question is how far, right? You've got elite best quarterback in the NFL, Ryan Tannehill, that we saw for like 9 weeks, and then you've got, Miami Tannehill, wherever that fuzzy line is. Now, where in that sort of spectrum is he going to land? So far, he's been a hell of a lot closer to Tannehill from last year than he has Miami Tannehill, which I didn't think I expected. If I was picking a spot between those two places, I would have probably plumbed for like equidistant in the middle, right? He's probably going to split the difference. So far, he really hasn't. Like, he's been a hell of a lot closer to last year's Tennessee Tannehill, which makes him like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. That's significant. Like, Tannehill goes from being, all right, he's a nice quarterback and he's better than your other options and he's an upgrade over Mariota, to this is a guy that can drive this team somewhere that they probably shouldn't be otherwise. And then the other thing is, teams at least through 2 weeks have figured out what to do about Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, game flow wise, this is what Tennessee wanted, right? Derrick Henry had 25 carries and Tannehill had 24 attempts. Now, he averaged 10 yards per attempt, and Henry averaged 3.4 per carry. And I get it. People are, there's dependency, and they pick their spots when they're going to pass. They use play action and all that stuff. But that also puts pressure on the quarterback, right? If you only have 24 attempts to make them all legit. But yeah, Henry, 3.4 yards per carry yesterday, long of 14 yards.
Yeah, and against Denver, I think they put down something of a blueprint, which is, look, if you're trying to stop him running straight at you with a head of steam, forget about it. The dude weighs 50 pounds more than defensive backs. He's got a stiff arm from hell. You're dead. But if you can get him running sideways, even if he's like slapping guys down in sequence, right?
Yeah.
And there's just a trail of defenders in his wake. As long as he doesn't get around you and get a chance to turn the corner, you've got something to work with. And so far we're seeing him like still rack up reasonable yardage. Almost all of it is still after contact. Like he's still getting a ton of yards after contact, but he's not getting around the edge and getting that forward progress, which is what he was doing last year. And I think the blocking is part of that, but also like defenses have started to understand what to do about this guy.
Good observation. I'm gonna go check out the film on that. I'm gonna rewatch all of his carries and take a look at that. Tennessee moves to 2-0. They are legit.
Jacksonville, James Robinson is ruining my take that the best running back on that roster is Miles Jack.
No, Robinson's looking pretty good.
Damn it.
You've had that. You don't come off a whole lot of takes.
Well, I mean, I was okay with that being the take when Fournette was there, but when he left, it was definitely true.
It's been your take for 5 years though.
Yeah,
because you didn't like.
I'm
Miles
still
Jack
not ready to give up on the Kenyon Drake is better than Derrick Henry thing.
Oh, jeez.
Dating back to senior season in Alabama.
Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. Man, do you want to credit the Rams or just start questioning the Eagles' existence right now?
Well, again, this is.
Let's start with the Rams.
What's really interesting about the NFL, I think, is so we start off and it's preseason, it's prediction time, and everyone lambasts your predictions because, well, look, last season this happened, so of course you're an idiot, right? We're 10 days away from everybody in the Bay Area tearing into me because I said the Seahawks were going to win that division, not the 49ers. And it was like, morons, this is a team that went to the Super Bowl. Seahawks have Russell Wilson, nothing else, right? Now, through 2 weeks, it suddenly looks like, completely different. So the first lesson is we know nothing before the season, right? You're in the dark. Even if you ran everything back, it wouldn't repeat. We don't have a clue what's going to happen in the upcoming season. We're just making best guesses. And then it's a case of through 2 weeks, the early part of the season is trying to figure out how much of what you're seeing is actually what's going on and how much of it is external factors weighing in on it, right? And then the other thing is how quickly can you actually readjust your prior takes, right? And so it's identifying what actually needs to adjust and then forcing yourself to actually make that adjustment, right? So for the Rams, I think that's a big part of it is the Rams, I think, are clearly better than we thought they were going to be heading into the season. But you've got the two-part process now of identifying how much of that is actually true and how much of it is Dallas aren't as good as we thought they were. Philadelphia certainly aren't great right now. And then how quickly can you actually adjust your expectations going forward?
All right, so no matter what you would have predicted going into the season, there's no way, there's nobody that would have predicted that sitting here 2 weeks in, it's only 2 weeks, and you just go to PFF's throw-by-throw accuracy, which we can do, which you guys can't yet, sorry, and you see Carson Wentz at the very bottom. Carson Wentz with the highest percentage of uncatchable passes, and, distant cousin of that is just how many accurate passes. How many have you put up right on? By far the lowest in the league, Carson Wentz. So, I mean, I always mention Carson Wentz. He's not as good as that 2017 MVP season. He's somewhere in between. He's mid-tier. He's going to fluctuate up and down. I don't think anybody's going to predict that. I mean, bottom line, that's the issue for the Eagles. Bad decisions by Carson Wentz, and his accuracy is all over the place. If he just hits a couple more throws in week 1 against Washington, okay, they win that game probably. I know he's under pressure and all that stuff, but I think that's when you talk about predictions. Who's predicting that type of regression from Carson Wentz looking horrible through 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly their problem on offense. The problem is the defense was just as bad.
No, I know, defense as well.
This is also one of those interesting games where game flow got away from them pretty quickly. Miles Sanders puts the ball in the dirt. The Rams immediately take the short field, put up a touchdown. Very quickly, this game got in a hole, which changes everything, right? Suddenly you're, 21-3 down. You're trying to get your way out of this this mess, and you don't get all the way back. But like, it's interesting how quickly games can like change things and get away from the quarterback. But the concerning part for the Eagles in this game is like they had Lane Johnson back at right tackle. Wentz wasn't under pressure that much. Like this was not a game where you look at it and you say, wow, they just destroyed him up front. They had no shot. Wentz was under duress all game long. Forget about it. Like they had a reasonable platform to work for, and still
Aaron Donald
just laid an egg.
Aaron Donald didn't play like Aaron Donald. Like he wasn't in the backfield. I think the Rams though are doing just a really good job. I mean, you watch some offenses and it feels like, okay, they're just super focused. They're on point. And that was like early McVay, right? Where it was just like, man, he's dialing up the right calls. They are just on. They're doing a good job of moving the pocket. They're protecting Goff. They went back to it again, opening night was, rollouts and screens, and they're doing that again. Another touchdown on a rollout for Goff. He has played just a clean brand of football. The opposite of Wentz. Goff has one of the lowest percentage of uncatchable passes. They are scheming it up well for him. He's executing. And then the Eagles on the other side of it. I don't know. I'm very disappointed in the Eagles' performance so far. It starts with Wentz. But again, to your point, it was week one. It felt like it was pressure. Defense has been not great either week. Man, I'm not going to give up on them because I still think they're talented. But this is, if you add in last year too, it's a rough stretch for Wentz. He was one of our lowest graded quarterbacks. They lost all their playmakers. He was one of our lowest graded quarterbacks in the second half last season. Right. And then you carry that into this year. Like, this is a concerning stretch. And it goes back to my point. They're in year 5 now. 4, right? The class of 2000, year 5, the class of 2016. You don't just get better every year. If they did, Carson Wentz would be the best quarterback of all time because year 2, he was an MVP candidate. So there are ebbs and flows to these guys. And now Goff is moving back up and Wentz is moving back down.
Yeah, I mean, Goff is an interesting quarterback because he is, like, when that offense is singing, he isn't just there as a passenger. Like, he actually adds a ton of value on top of what they're doing. But when that offense falls to pieces and it's not in rhythm and it's a mess, like, he just collapses. He looks like garbage. McVay has shown the evolution of that system, right? The thing that was a concern for a while, that there's no 2.0 and teams have started to figure it out. McVay it's evolved. It's come on. They're doing different things. They're causing different problems for defenses. And it's working. And a huge part of that is the offensive line is able to keep its head above water again, which is going to help. But when that happens, Goff isn't just this sort of extra that facilitates everything. He actually adds value on top of those, makes some plays, drops some beautiful dimes in there. So the Rams, like, they go back to being like a serious threat in that division that's looking like the best division in the NFL.
So that's the bottom line with the Rams, right? So coming into the year, here's the thing, right? We gave them the number 31 offensive line in the league last year, right? Coming off of being ranked top 10. So it was like the Tannehill thing, right? You have to expect at least something in between. But there's also the talent there, especially at the tackles, some developing interior players that the Rams would be able to at least solve that, or, help that issue from last year. And they have. Then you have Darrell Henderson stepping up, looking like the player that people hoped for, coming out of Memphis, 81 yards on 12 carries. We saw a 40-yard gain, saw a 28-yard reception. So they've got some. That was the other. My big question was the offensive line and kind of replacing that deep threat in Brandon Cooks, and then just figuring it out on the back end with losing Corey Litt. There was just a lot of guys to lose that they were losing, and so far handling things pretty well.
Yeah, and the offensive line taking a big step forward makes the running game sing again. Back to like Todd Gurley went as that offensive line went. The same thing is true with everybody else that's run behind it. Like, C.J. Anderson looked fantastic when he came in off his couch, right? And the guy's retired now. Like, the same thing is true. Those guys all look good when that offensive line is playing well. Now, they got banged up yesterday. Again, like the casualty of the 2020 week 2, they lost a lot of bodies, so that's a concern. But the Rams are a hell of a lot better. The Eagles, I think, are in trouble, but their division is going to help them out, right? I know Dallas snuck a win yesterday, but like, that's not a division where someone's going to run away with it. So they have a lot of margin for error to get their shit together over the first half of the season. without being, 6 games behind the lead and have no shot of making a wild card spot?
One team with little margin of error for error, San Francisco 49ers, staying in that NFC West, and the New York Jets. No margin for error for either of them. Jets might be on their way to Trevor Lawrence.
Yes.
They're not looking good at all. 49ers bounced back, though, again, the injury bug struck them as well.
Oh, it didn't just strike them. It took a hammer to that roster. Like, Nick Bosa went down with, I think, an ACL. Solomon Thomas, they lost running backs. They've already lost, they're still without half their receiving core.
Jimmy Garoppolo banged up.
That is rough. I mean, obviously the Nick Bosa thing is a body blow. Like, that guy going down, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. We saw the kind of transformative effect he can have individually on the defense. A season ago, you take that away, that's a massive, massive problem.
Yeah, I think so. At the end of the day, I think Garoppolo played a clean, efficient game. We're gonna have Darnold playing a little bit better than maybe the stats would show. And I think going back to coming into the year, what were the Jets going to be able to do offensively? Deplete an already questionable receiving core is depleted with Braxton Berrios and Chris Hogan and Josh Malone out there getting the majority of the targets.
That was miserable.
So there's really not much. I don't think there's much you can do if you're the Jets going up against a pretty good 49ers team.
They're in such a tough spot because all the reasons for optimism around Sam Darnold are still there. But you cannot. How can you judge him based off what's around him right now?
It is the complete opposite of what Josh Allen has in Buffalo.
Right.
They'll always be somewhat compared coming out of the same draft class, just like Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson and Josh Rosen. But as Buffalo has added weapons and offensive line talent and all that stuff, the Jets have gotten worse.
I mean, Rosen. The same thing's true with Rosen. Like, that guy's career is over because he had no shot, right? He had the worst possible situation around him to start his career, right? In 2 different spots. And his career is basically now over. Like, the dude's sitting on a practice squad now with the entire league having given up on him. Darnold, at least, is still getting a shot to play, but he's dealing with basically the same thing, which is the team around him is not capable of allowing him to show that he's the future. So he played pretty well yesterday, I thought. But I think dude's thrown to Braxton Berrios and his only viable receiver in Brashad Perriman got hurt, and now he's throwing to nobody. You can't. How are you supposed to? And the Jets are probably going to be bad enough to be in that number 1 overall pick spot. Is he just immediately drop kicked out of the door because you have a shot at Trevor Lawrence?
So again, this is what I think is just fascinating about the NFL right now. Sam Darnold in the right situation could be a viable quarterback. But I think you need to look for more than just viable. You want to look for more than just a viable quarterback. You want to look for a potential top 10 quarterback.
What if he could actually be a good quarterback?
He could be good. Shot. Well, I think my point is if they have a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields opportunity at the end of the year, there might be a little bit of Darnold value. So those 6 or 8 teams that are looking for quarterbacks at the end of the year might want to invest in Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
And there's a possibility there.
The problem with that is he's just shown that he's just shown that if you put him in a bad situation, it's not going to go well, right? So what you actually, for his point of view, you basically say, all right, the end of the year, they get Trevor Lawrence. I'm now trade bait. My best bet is to go to a team that has an established starter, isn't terrible, and hope that something happens and I get a shot somewhere, right? Like a Minnesota Vikings with a Kirk Cousins maybe. Like if they piece things back together and they're sort of okay, it's like, right, we go to be Kirk Cousins' backup. We hope that he gets hurt or they finally get sick of, him being him.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating that we're at that point, right? I mean, Josh Rosen's doing that in Tampa Bay, right? He's just sitting on the practice squad. We are at this point where I think there are some good, not failed first round pick. Darnold's, if he has an okay season, I don't think he's a failed first round pick.
Well, he's on his way to failing, but it's not his fault.
Yes, there's still enough of a question mark. It's not like a legitimate, with Blaine Gabbert, there was never really a question of in the right system, is he going to be okay? There's still going to be questions about Sam Darnold at the end of the year. Carolina Panthers at the Tampa Bay Bucs. This one looked like it was going to be a blowout early on. Tampa Bay kind of let the Panthers back in. Panthers did a nice job battling back in. Once again, context-wise, the Bucs now through 2 weeks have played maybe the best team in the NFL in the Saints, and then one of the worst teams in the NFL in the Carolina Panthers. For the second straight week, Tom Brady is going to grade way better than his stats.
And in both games, most of Brady's best throws were not caught by his receivers.
This was actually ridiculous. It was unbelievable.
Had 2 touchdowns that weren't caught, and one. Everyone was saying 3, but the one that beamed his receiver in the face, he was leading him out of bounds. Like, there's no way that guy was catching it and staying in bounds and going down the sideline for the touchdown. But it was wide the hell open for a big gain down the field.
It was going to be a big gain. I mean, he hit him in the helmet. It should have been caught at least.
Right, but I'm saying that like everyone's saying that's a 3rd touchdown because he was so open, but I don't think there's any way that guy's catching it, staying in bounds, and going down to score. Like, he's going to get a big gain and go out of bounds there. But
I don't
2
think
touchdowns dropped.
Yes, and in week 1, again, a lot of he had some pretty decent big time throws that just didn't show up in the stat sheet. So the talk shows probably aren't talking about Tom Brady today because they won and it was against the Panthers, and who cares? But if they were looking at the stat line and calling Brady washed again, like he had 12 incompletions, 7 of which were dropped. Mm-hmm. So he's a few drops away from being 30 for 35 yesterday. Again, Panthers defense not great, but I thought Brady looked fantastic yesterday, better than he did in week 1, other than the 1 interception that he sailed to Gronkowski. So
his completion percent jumps 20 percentage points if you adjust for drops.
Yeah.
Like, he goes from
completely different narrative.
Yeah. The other thing, so this is the fascinating thing to me, is this last week it was, all right, Brady, the biggest concern to me was not that they lost, not that Brady threw the ugly pick 6 or threw 2 interceptions overall. It was this mesh between Brady and Arians doesn't look great right now, right? And what was I always wondered why the immediate thing with these guys is, well, look, you don't have time for him to for you to figure out what this offense looks like. And year 2, it's an amazing connection. You get 2015 Carson Palmer season out of it, right? Brady is 52 years old. He's not going to you don't have a multi-year strategy here.
Right.
He needs to be good right now so you can win a Super Bowl. At which point, why don't you do what Denver did with Peyton Manning and say, all right, Peyton, tell us what the offense is. Like, I'm not teaching you what to do after 15 years of being amazing at what you do. Just tell us what you're running and we'll figure it out, right? Why wasn't Tampa Bay's first approach to just say, all right, Tom, what's the offense? Tell us how to run it.
See, I don't think it's that clean, though.
But this is week 2 looked a lot more like that.
It did. So there was a lot more, like empty, a little bit more play action, empty on early downs and stuff like that. I think there's a hybrid to be had.
There lot just needs shallower depth of target. Like, this looked a lot more like Patriots Brady offense than it did look like Arians offense.
But they also don't have the personnel to have a yak-centric, not that they were, but to have those yak-centric plays. Like, they're throwing design screens to Leonard Fournette, and I know he had the big run at the end and all that stuff. They're throwing design swings to Leonard Fournette where he's running in quicksand. Like, they've got no shot. LaShawn McCoy doesn't catch the ball well out of the backfield. He had one of the drops in the end zone. Like, they don't have the backs to run that offense. They don't have the middle of the field players, the slot receivers or tight ends to really, the tight ends can do it. They don't have the slot receivers to do it. So I think they have, adjusted a little bit. They put Mike Evans in the slot for a seam route and all that stuff. I think bottom line, Brady threw the ball well. I think we're going to see more chunk play opportunities in this offense. For it to move forward, they need to figure out what the short area stuff looks like, right? Like, because Brady would like to have some of those gimmies and some of those easier passes where he could get into a rhythm and use his accuracy and all that stuff. I just don't know if they have the personnel for that.
Yeah, the good part about that is I think that's easier to find than the personnel for the opposite. Like, we know they have the personnel for the deep game and for a higher, bigger or lower percentage but bigger threat chunk plays. I think the yak stuff is kind of easier to find. What are you doing? You're moving the whole table.
I pulled myself forward. I moved the table. Did I ruin the shot?
Probably. So to me, it's a good thing that they showed potentially that they're going away from pure Bruce Arians offense to something more approximating what Brady's been used to for the past 20 years.
For sure. And they did it without Chris Godwin. So I think they're
right.
I think they're going to be okay offensively. And I just encourage people to check out the PFF grades rather than the stats, because Brady's actually thrown the ball really well the first 2 weeks, other than the pick 6. Teddy Bridgewater, he had a solid game too. Had a couple bad decisions in there too, but I think the Panthers are just fighting an uphill battle here this season, especially defensively.
Tampa Bay's defense is legit as well. Still, I mean,
they kind of impressed me against. They gave a little bit up against the Saints and all that, but they fly around and there's a little boom or bust to that defense, right? And
Sure.
I think, and again, when you're talking about the Bucs from a long-term standpoint, the schedule gets they have a rough stretch early. The schedule gets a little softer down the stretch. The Bucs might be one of those teams that's peaking and like looking dangerous in December, and they just have that high upside type of defense where they can make a run. I think that's the bottom line for the Bucs right now. Where are we going next?
New York Giants at Chicago.
Giants at the Bears. Mitchell Trubisky versus Daniel Jones. I thought the Bears defense did a pretty nice job early on. I mean, they did a nice job overall. They were playing some tight man coverage, making life difficult on Daniel Jones. I thought, again, I was impressed with Daniel Jones. Again, we're trying to separate quarterbacks from their ecosystem, right?
I was less impressed, and I was actually pretty impressed by Jones in week 1, given what the Steelers threw at him.
I was definitely less impressed. His issue is a lot like the Minshew stuff. It's the late in the down. Like here's this double pump and we're going to fumble. There's this double pump and we're going to throw it late into coverage. I thought the Bears actually made it a little bit easier for him as they started to play a little bit more zone and opened up some passing lanes. But Jones, again, is not working with the greatest.
Oh, no, yeah. He's behind the 8 ball. But so I screwed this game up in terms of predictions because I was really impressed by Jones week 1. I thought he'd have significantly more success given that Chicago is not Pittsburgh in week 2. And we'd see the battle of the better quarterback essentially win out, and Jones leads the team to win. Didn't happen. Jones looked worse in week 1. The Bears' defense may be as good as Pittsburgh's. And more importantly, is Trubisky actually turning a corner? Like, this is 2 weeks now. Again, so in this world of context for 2 weeks, the Giants' defense is bad.
And the Lions' defense is bad.
Right. Particularly in week 1 when they didn't have Jeffrey Okudah and, they were dealing with defensive backs that they shouldn't be playing, right? So 2 pretty bad defenses, but it is a significant and notable step forward in performance from Trubisky from a year ago, right? He was heading in the wrong direction. And this is really interesting because everybody was focusing on the Lions heading into the season as like an underdog dark horse pick. The Chicago Bears are light years better than people think they are if Trubisky is anything north of garbage.
I thought he looked confident. This might be the best. I don't want to overrate this whole thing. 2018 was an overrated year for Trubisky. Yeah. Lucky things happened. He made some big plays and all that stuff. We talked about that enough. I thought yesterday, I think he looks like he's got a little bit more zip in his arm. I think he's just playing with confidence. Tight window throws, the way he's maneuvering the pocket. It's not as, last year it felt a little bit more panicked when he's getting out of the pocket, right? And he's not getting out of the pocket to make plays at the right time. I thought yesterday was a lot cleaner. He had that nice touchdown to David Montgomery where he rolled out and, put it on. It was easy pass, but I'm just saying, I just think he's playing the game and seeing it a little bit better. Now, all that said, he's still missing more throws than most quarterbacks in the league. Like, it's still not great, but it's
that's the thing. It
tight window throws and some of the confident plays I've been impressed with.
They don't need him to be great. That's what makes the Bears really interesting. Like, they were a team. The problem with Trubisky is that he became so bad that he was crippling to everything, right? Like, Matt Nagy stripped down that offense and tried to make it idiot-proof, and he was still too big an idiot for the idiot-proof offense. Like, they couldn't make the offense idiot-proof enough that the idiot they had a year ago was functioning in it. This year, Trubisky's different. Like, he is, again, 2 weeks, who knows? But so far, he has been viable. And if they get a viable quarterback, this is a good team.
This is set up for, the Bears' schedule is set up for a classic Trubisky coaster right now. You get the Falcons next week, who can't stop anybody.
Right.
Then you have the Colts, who are solid. That's going to be a tough game. You get the Bucs, who we just talked about. That's going to be a tough game. Then you get the Panthers. Get a nice one against the Panthers to kind of bounce back, keep your job. Then you get the Rams, another tough team, and then the Saints. This is good. Like, every single week, we're going to have some ebbs and flows here, I think, with Trubisky. But again, coming out of yesterday, I was impressed.
I just think it's like we wrote off Trubisky as completely non-viable last season. The evidence from last season, I think that was entirely fair. The idea that he was a starter heading into this year, I think, is kind of crazy. But so far, this has been a different player. Like, he's not great, and he's not even good, but he's playing at a level that makes this team viable, and therefore, like, we talked before, this is a team that like had talent, and the problem with Trubisky is he was invalidating all of it, but he's actually playing at a level now where the rest of the roster can look as good as it is.
Our old friend Lauren Cox put a viral video together last week.
Allen Robinson.
Save Allen Robinson and all that stuff. I have to say, Allen Robinson made Mitchell look bad yesterday.
Yeah, my brain is not able to compute the idea that Trubisky is being let down by his receivers at the moment. That's actually what's happening.
There was one of his interceptions, the tipped interception, more on the receiver. A dig route, he's got to lead him. The receiver stopped a little bit. Slightly underthrown ball up the sideline that should have just been incomplete or potentially complete. Ends up intercepted. Trubisky actually had some bad luck. I kind of like the way when Allen Robinson's still awesome. But Darnell Mooney, speedy guy, rookie out of Tulane. Anthony Miller let Trubisky down too. They ran that pick route, and he had to drop touchdown in the end zone. So Javon Wims has played pretty well. Like, as far as like skill sets and guys able to get open, assuming they catch the ball, it is an intriguing group again, much like it was in 2018, which I think could make the Bears dangerous. Do you know when we made our predictions, I spent 3 seconds trying to have like a bold take on who's going to have the first overall pick? I made an idiot take, Sam.
Oh, yeah?
I picked the Bears. Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I spent 2 seconds thinking about it. I was like, just Bears. I was looking at what everybody else picked, and everybody went Jaguars and Jets.
Yeah.
So I decided to be different. You picked the Jets?
Yeah.
You're looking good.
Yeah, so far.
You are looking good so far. You might have it. So how about them Bears at 2-0? Atlanta Falcons at the Dallas Cowboys. Let's try to not talk about this game for an hour, but what a just ridiculous game. Atlanta's back seven. Coming into the season, we were wondering about their back seven. Can they stop anybody? No, they can't.
Yes.
But they were up 20-0, 29-10, and then they had a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter and still managed to blow it.
Can we just distill it down to what in God's name were the special teams, the hands team, doing as they watched the ball turn right and roll 5 yards into where it needed to be?
I call that one the hypnotizer.
There's three people.
They were hypnotized
There were
by the
three
ball.
separate Falcons just watching this thing turn towards the line that it needed to cross and like do nothing. Like, you can touch it before it goes over that line. You don't have to wait for it to go 10 yards. The Cowboys have to wait for it to go 10 yards. You can pick it up whenever you want.
Yeah.
Jump on it.
Hypnotized.
It was amazing. And so everyone's like going crazy about, oh, what a great kick that is. Like, it's not. If any one of three separate Falcons just fall on the ball 5 yards ahead of where it needed to go, it's a terrible kick. And you're like, what kind of awful...
And you're like, the ball, you don't know which way the ball's going to bounce.
You're a 250-pound man. It's a small football. Just throw yourself on top of it.
That was bad. The Falcons found a way to absolutely blow that game. You also, Russell Gage throws a dime to Julio Jones, who drops it. I mean, the Falcons receivers have been putting corners in a blender. Like Calvin Ridley's route running, outstanding.
I'm so glad that they got Gage a touchdown, like a receiving touchdown, to offset the fact that Julio dropped his deep bomb.
Yeah, here's the ridiculous thing. The Cowboys lost 3 fumbles in the first half. Zeke, Dak, losing fumbles. It was ridiculous. Tony Pollard had a fumble that should have been, like, that almost was. I mean, it was insane how they were just handing the ball over. The Falcons were scoring coming out of that. They did score field goals instead of touchdowns a couple times. I think one of my takeaways, though, from the first 2 weeks, I had concerns about both of these teams in the back seven, coverage-wise. Atlanta, absolutely. They've been torched by Russell Wilson, now by Dak and the Cowboys. And then, Cowboys with Trevon Diggs, Chidobe Awuzie, Jordan Lewis. They were always this, like, they felt like this dead smack in the middle, mid-tier group of corners that could go either way, and I think they're going the wrong way.
Diggs has got his hands to like 3 footballs so far, though, and hasn't come up with any of them. Like,
Ryan's stat line looks ridiculous. He could have easily had 3 picks.
Like Trevon Diggs in particular, though, has been inches away from making like 3 pretty damn big plays in terms of turnovers. It just hasn't snagged them yet. That's kind of encouraging. By the way, did you also see the play where Zeke Elliott just crucified Casey on the goal line? Like, it's a classic play where you get the one-on-one encounter in the hole, basically just Oklahoma drill. Who wants it more? This is a head-on collision. It's a car crash. And you get to see that, you know what? Running backs might not matter all that much, but there's every now and again you're going to find a play where it's you versus me, and you're just better at that than I am. And Casey's not a bad player, and he just got, like, his soul was removed from his body by a head-on collision with Zeke Elliott.
I mean, all things equal, I'd rather have a good running back. I'd rather have a guy that, makes some plays. I just think, Dallas's offense, Dallas is doing a lot of things that are going to pan out in the end. In week 1, I didn't get to talk about it, but Mike McCarthy goes for it on 4th down, right decision, and gets absolutely crushed for it.
What were they doing yesterday? These fake punts.
Yeah, I mean, they had all the fumbles plus the fake punt, just poorly executed.
But this is the thing, right? The discussion on going for it on 4th down gets conflated with a bunch of different things, right? Going for it on 4th down is the right decision way more often than it's actually taken, right? But it's not the end of the conversation. Once you've decided to go for it on 4th down, you now need to decide how you're going for it. And that's where teams seem to have struggled. Go for it, just go for it better. And when you're going for it, go for it with your offense, the players that are supposed to be throwing the ball, not the punter. If you're going to run a fake punt, at the very minimum, you should check that the punter is capable of throwing the ball to the gunner 15 yards away over there.
Well,
which
given
apparently
the gunner's
wasn't.
Disappointment, apparently they executed it in practice. He was disappointed in the bad throw coming from the punter.
I would be as well, on the basis that my 6-year-old could make that throw.
I like some of the other stuff. I think
7.
the offense started to look explosive as expected. Again, Falcons secondary, their safeties were absolutely brutal yesterday. But you have Amari Cooper, you had CeeDee Lamb averaging almost 10 yards after the catch per reception, getting him the ball in the flat, getting him the ball over the middle of the field. Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz is even catching passes. But then you got Dak using the QB sneak on the goal line. He ran for 3 touchdowns, including a keeper. They go for it down 9. They go for 2, right? That was one. The announcers are always, their mind is boggled. Why would you do that? You always just kick it and then you get the 2-point conversion later.
Says.
But that decision is what led you do it as early as possible so that so a 2-point conversion that fails doesn't just end the game.
Yeah.
So they failed early. They knew they were chasing 2 scores, and they got to their game flow changed, which led to the onside kick, which led to the hypnotizer, which led to the so those are the decisions that add up. So even though Mike McCarthy the decision didn't pan out in week 1, these things are going to add up over time. And that's part of the reason why I like the Cowboys, though. Look, the Falcons have made the Seahawks look bad defensively and the Cowboys look bad coverage-wise.
You need to put that in an email to John Fossil. I bet you can get that thing named the hypnotizer.
The hypnotizer?
Yeah. You send him off an email. We've got contacts. Send him. We can get in touch with John.
Can we get John Fossil on the phone here?
I'm just saying, you put that in an email and say, "Hey, John, the great play, loved it."
The hypnotizer.
Nothing to do with the.
I just appreciate that with this new onside kick rule, instead of sulking, kickers went back to the drawing board and they used the 23 hours a day that they have of free time to figure out new ways for onside kicks.
Except most of them haven't. The ironic thing about this is the only guy that's actually figured out the new way you should be kicking the onside kicks is Younghoe Koo for the Falcons, right? That guy's actually identified the correct technique for today's onside kick rules. The Dallas guy just did a weird kick and it happened to work because 3 guys just stared at it as it went 5 yards in the wrong direction.
Hypnotizer.
The hypnotizer.
So Dallas, I mean, this was last year. I thought that Atlanta in week 2 salvaged their season. They made a couple big 4th down decisions. They won a game against Philadelphia. They ended up being terrible the rest of the year. But I think Dallas had a chance. They really, the NFC East isn't great, but did this salvage their season? A game that they absolutely should not have won. Like if they scored 40 points while having failed, fake punts and losing 3 fumbles, they could have scored 60 if they just held on to the ball.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of in the same situation as the Eagles, right? In which I think this division is just going to be a bunch of people stumbling towards the finish line.
Yeah.
So no amount of being bad up front would have precluded them from making the postseason, even as division winners. But this is a team that's in a lot of people's Super Bowl conversations preseason. Stumbling to the postseason is not a success for this team, right? They fired Jason Garrett because Like, that wasn't good enough, right? This team's supposed to be contending for a Super Bowl. So they need to be better than that. And this salvaged that, right? This salvaged the idea that this team can be a contender and actually go somewhere, as opposed to just being the last guy standing.
Dak is throwing the ball really well right now. Atlanta may have lost their season, down to 0-2 in a difficult NFC South. Washington football team and the Arizona Cardinals. I think this is more the Washington football team that we expected after their surprising Week 1 win. Cardinals doing stuff like going for it in their own territory at the 30 and all that stuff. So, I mean, they played a pretty efficient game. And I think the expected result here, Cardinals over Washington.
God, I'm starting to get excited about the Cardinals.
Indy Isabella with a D pass.
Yeah. I was excited by this team on paper heading into the season because I thought the year one evolution of Kliff Kingsbury's offense was really encouraging, right? Like, he didn't just come in with a system and was like, this is what I'm running, and we'll figure it out if it needs to be adjusted down the line. Like, he figured out after like 6 weeks that, okay, this thing isn't going to function the way it did in college. I'm going to need to make some adjustments, and made some pretty substantial changes in terms of personnel usage, in terms of exactly route running concepts, those kinds of things. And he did that like on the fly in the middle of the first year with a rookie quarterback trying to learn the system as well. I think that was a good sign. Year two, we're seeing them like add weapons, add parts to this team, like add some more trinkets and some more danger. And suddenly now you've got to worry about Kyler Murray on the designed run plays, who's one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the NFL, in addition to what he does with his arm, in addition to the fact that Nuke Hopkins is now in the building, and like now there's a legit number one receiver to worry about. This offense, even though like the offensive line isn't very good, is kind of scary.
Yeah, they looked early in Week 1. I thought they were going to get Kyler killed. The 49ers were destroying them with those wide splits. Like, they were getting somebody in his face every single time. They settled down since that point. Kyler Murray, this is why I think we liked him part of the reason why we liked him so much coming out. His floor is high because of the rushing ability.
Yes, if you lean into it.
If you lean into it, right? And he's 2 weeks in a row, 2 dynamic, highlight reel runs for touchdowns and everything. So we'll talk about Cam Newton in a minute, but yeah, Dak ran for 3. I mean, there's rushing touchdowns left and right. Josh Allen, what he's doing on the ground. I mean, more than ever, rushing quarterbacks, of course, Lamar, having just a massive impact. And I think that's when you do tap into it, and you have Nuke, to your point, who could be a high volume guy, and he just looks fantastic. He looks quicker. He just looks quick and fast. Like, I think even better than he did in Houston overall.
Helps if you don't cover him in the end zone.
Well, I'm just talking overall this season so far, not so much that particular play. I've just been impressed. And it's another one of those teams, Hopkins allows Fitz to play his role and a Christian Kirk to play his role and Indy Isabella to play his role. The trickle-down effect for that receiving core plus Murray's rushing ability, fantastic.
I just think the fact that they've added those things to the offense suddenly makes them scary. And now they're 2-0. Like, they're setting the pace within the division. I wrote before the season that don't be surprised if the Cardinals are better quicker than you expect them to be.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how much I believe that and how much it was just like, well, look, this could happen. Let's put it down. But it's happening. This team's kind of scary on offense.
The NFC West is 7-1.
Yeah.
Is that right? No.
2, 4, 5.
It was Arizona. Yeah. Because San Francisco, they're all, there's 3 2-0 teams, and confusing myself for a second there. So the Niners are in last at 1-1. So wait until they continue. They already played each other, but they'll continue to play each other, and it's going to be an exciting division this season. A couple more to get through. Baltimore Ravens at the Houston Texans. Another one the Texans have just been dealt Kansas City and Baltimore in weeks 1 and 2.
Yeah.
It's got to get better for them. But I still don't know that we have enough answers on Deshaun Watson and that passing game, if it's actually better without Hopkins. Watson's still doing his same spectacular plays, but taking sacks and some bad plays.
Definitely not better.
Yeah.
I think that part's been answered. The question is it ever going to get better, or did they just shoot themselves in the foot?
Yeah, and Baltimore just another clean, efficient effort from Lamar Jackson. Running game was better, I think, this week. It was definitely better this week than it was in week 1 against the Browns. They actually weren't great in week 1 running the ball. It wasn't like your classic Ravens running like crazy. I think they still had some, have some questions at guard and everything. But Baltimore, I think, is one of those teams now that can just win in different ways. Week 1, they didn't run the ball well. This game, 230 yards. Mark Ingram with the big run to the end to kind of seal it. They could beat you in different ways. And defensively, your call that they were going to be awesome this year, they've only given up 22 points in 2 games.
Well, yeah. So week 1, it's the second year in a row that a team has come in with like a clear game plan. It's like, look, week 1, you get the entire offseason to basically strategize for one opponent, and you come in with this new game plan. Week 1 is the second year in a row that a team has come in with a clear and obvious strategy to try and shut down Lamar Jackson. And he's just gone, that's the plan? Okay, fine. I'll do something else and just wreck you. Like the Dolphins came in, just crowded the line of scrimmage, were like daring you, okay, pass over the top of us. We know you can't be a passing quarterback. And he was like, 5 touchdowns over their heads. Browns kind of did the same thing and, again, lit them up. But this is what the Ravens want to do, like just run the living crap out of the opposition and grind the ball down their throats, and you can't stop it. So, again, like Lamar Jackson, there's no blueprint. There's no kryptonite that we're waiting to discover. This is not a flash in the pan that, there's a ticking clock until the NFL defenses figure out what Lamar's doing, catch up with it, and identify the way of stopping it. It's not happening. Like, there's no answer to what he's doing. He is a singularly unique talent and is too good at everything you need him to be good at in order to make it, or in order to invalidate any game plan you have. If you want to load up against the run and stop the fact that he's changing the numbers game up front, he's good enough as a passer to take advantage of the single coverage on the back end. If you want to play conservative and back off and try and limit the big plays, he's just going to pick up 8 yards per carry on the ground every time. Like, he is an impossible to defend entity right now.
I'd rather take that week 1 approach and make him make big time throws like he did. He just executed extremely well. And even yesterday, he took a few negative plays yesterday, more than he had in the past. But even then, there were so many times where you look like you got him, or everybody's covered, and it's like, I'll just pick up 4 or 5 on the ground scrambling. Like, he did scramble more a little bit, more yesterday than he has. And that's the thing too, is just he is really good at limiting. He doesn't get sacked a ton for a guy that is mobile or scrambles or likes to hold on to the ball and go through his progression. So there's just not those negative plays either, and that makes them so dangerous.
Yeah,
so
I think teams are still of the opinion that what we saw in terms of the Tennessee game in the playoffs is the way you beat him, right? Which is this narrative: Lamar can't play from behind, he can't win when all you have is the passing game. I don't think that that's true. I think he just didn't in that game. Like, they got in an ugly hole quickly, and he had to pass from behind the whole way. Now, that's a situation most quarterbacks struggle in, right? So the fact that he did struggle relatively is not like revolutionary, right? It's not, hey, Lamar can't pass. It's most quarterbacks do not play well in that situation. The ones that do are exceptions, and it's not an every game thing. 2, it was 1 game. Like, maybe if you ran it back and you put him in a hole, he'd bring them back. Like, he didn't play that badly. Maybe he doesn't make the ugly decision, and cost him. Like, maybe he actually is fine playing from behind if you just ran it back again. So this is the problem with small sample sizes, and particularly small sample sizes on big stages, is you get lulled into this idea that because you saw it twice or once, that's the way it works. Maybe you just saw the one time where that actually happens. Like, the idea that if you force Lamar Jackson to be a passing quarterback, you win because he isn't that good is just wrong. He's better than that.
I would just say overall, like, Lamar's game was heavily dependent on big time throws in week 1, just from a PFF perspective. You would take that for any quarterback, right? Even like Aaron Rodgers in his prime, if it's like, the way you're going to beat me is you have to make 4 or 5 special throws per game, even though he's more than capable and he very well might do it, you would rather that. Like, if you could build your defense around like a small margin of error type of throw, you would do that. But Lamar has shown that he can execute. That was what was scariest about the Ravens in week 1, I think, is they won, I think, without the rushing attack being as on schedule as they usually are.
Yeah, it might still be the game plan. I'm just saying that if you're expecting that okay, all we got to do is to take away the run and force him to pass, we'll win because he's not a good passer. If you think that about Lamar Jackson now, you're just outdated. You're behind the times by at least a year. Like the fact that that's how it panned out against Tennessee in the playoffs should not be what is leading you to think that that is the way of stopping him, because it isn't.
All right, let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers. What a crazy turn of events. Tyrod Taylor expected to start. Was feeling ill before the game, I believe it was.
I thought it was a chest injury.
Breathing.
It was ribs or something.
He was having breathing issues.
It was a rib injury that he aggravated in warm-ups.
So Justin Herbert comes out of nowhere to start. He just runs onto the field. Nobody knew. I think he did some classic Justin Herbert things. He missed a bunch of throws. He made some really nice throws. He flipped the field. That was my article. He's field flipping arm strength. And that's what he showed. So he's got those big, very Josh Allen-like. You've got big play potential. He did, lost in the mix is how many throws he just missed, that could have moved the chains. But overall, for a guy that got just thrust in there, he looked pretty good.
So this very quickly before we get into how he played, the fact that he knew 20 minutes before the game started, good or a bad thing in terms of his preparation?
I think for a rookie, it's probably good. I mean, it's different. Football is a preparation sport, right?
Yes.
You actually have to know stuff, and it's not just react, right? So assuming he did his QB2 type of preparation, there is this element of, hey, just get out there and play. Don't overthink it.
Yeah. Everybody was using this as wow, that guy
wait till he practices.
Right. Well, no, not even that. But he didn't know until 10 minutes before the game. The fact that he's able to go out there and play like this is amazing. I think that that's actually a significantly better way of introducing him than him knowing and having to as long as you said that, providing he was doing the preparation anyway, right? If he went on the basis that, well, I'm not starting this week and didn't prepare for anything, then that's not good. But if he was prepared, that cliche of I'm preparing as if I'm the starter every week, if he's actually doing that, I think you're way better off just dumping it on him, saying, oh, kid, you're starting. Tyrod's hurt. Out you go. Have fun.
Right.
And giving him zero time to think about it than you are giving him the full week of, overthinking and terrifying himself because he's facing the world champion Kansas City Chiefs with a week's notice. I think that's actually a better thing to go out there and just let loose. And I think you saw some of that, right? Some of the plays he was making were just out there on instinct. I thought he made some good plays with his legs, but the touchdown he hit in the left corner of the end zone was insane.
That was nice. That was really nice.
That was you beat a cornerback who was looking for that throw to a spot in the end zone from a reasonable distance. That is a rare throw to be able to make. And for a rookie to do it is really impressive.
Yeah, the reservations with Herbert is the throw-for-throw consistency. So the same thing I said about Aaron Rodgers early in the show. The special stuff's there. It's always been there, but what's the middle 30? What's those middle 30 plays outside of the high-end plays? That's the question with Herbert. I love that pass, the seam route to Keenan Allen that he put right on his hands. Just ridiculous. He showed that at Oregon. Herbert showed that at Oregon a lot, the ability to just throw lasers for big chunk plays. And that's why I liked him starting better than Tyrod with this group of playmakers. I think he takes advantage of this receiving group with Mike Williams, with Keenan Allen, with Hunter Henry, more than, say, a Tyrod.
The thing, this game was interesting because I think with Tyrod going in there, the only way it made any sense was if you were going to lean into this athleticism that he brings and run a sort of Baltimore-style offense to try and just chew the clock. They bring in Herbert, completely different style of quarterback, one that you wouldn't have thought was well suited to that kind of offense. And yet one of the first things he does is execute this giant long drive that chews 10 minutes off the clock and essentially has the same effect, but actually there's big plays in there as well. Do you think Anthony Lynn's basically, he's come out and said, look, as soon as Tyrod's healthy, he's the quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know if I can buy into that.
Is that just what you say coming out of the guy doesn't lose his job because he got a rib injury
because no matter how much you like Tyrod, not you, but just one might like Tyrod, Justin Herbert's your guy, right? You drafted number 6 for a reason.
You
put him out there and he looked half decent. It's like if he looked like early Jared Goff career or Blaine Gabbert, you're like, all right, the poor kid got thrown out there. He went up against the Super Bowl champs, made some throws. The situation didn't look too big for him.
Hung in all the way to the end, it wasn't just early in the game he looked great, and then as things, as the Chiefs got back into it,
they hung around.
Right, they continued, and he executed a drive late. Yeah, I understand why you don't start him. He wasn't the guy that we loved in terms of NFL readiness right out of the gate. So, okay, he's not ready. He doesn't look ready in training camp or whatever. You start Tyrod. But, I mean, that game showed that he looked ready. Maybe it was just a one-game sample size, but it would be really hard to look at that game and say, he's still not ready for this stage. Let's put Tyrod back in.
I think it was time. I think it's time now. I mean, I would have to say, too, more concerning, I think the Chiefs' offense looked poor. The Chargers made them look bad.
Well, this was the Super Bowl.
Worse than they've ever have.
It was the Super Bowl again, right? It was
not worse than they've ever had. Yeah,
it was evidence that if you really get after them, if you throw a ton of pressure at them, you can get to Patrick Mahomes and you can get him off his game. You can slow him down. The problem is, and this is what we saw in the Super Bowl, you just can't get it done for 60 minutes. It's impossible. Right. Eventually, he's going to get a play in there. And that, if he's hung around, unless your offense has racked up 35 points already, right? That's the if you have a kick-ass offense in and of on your own, and you're able to rattle him that much with that much pressure, now you can buy yourself enough breathing space to get away and to get into the distance so that you can't close the gap. But if your offense isn't amazing and he's able to keep it within 10 within 2 scores, they're going to get you eventually. And it happened in the Super Bowl with the Wasp play. It happened here with the deep shot to Tyreek Hill.
Just ridiculous.
But that's the problem, right? Eventually they're going to get you. You cannot do that for 60 minutes. And this was Joey Bosa had an insane game in terms of pressure.
11 pressures.
Mitchell Schwartz. Primarily against Mitchell Schwartz, who's the best right tackle in the game, doesn't give up pressure. They were able to get to Mahomes in a way we haven't seen. I was going to say since the Super Bowl, that's 2 games, but basically we've seen it twice, right?
It was 9 months though.
Yeah.
So 2
teams have done that to Mahomes, and that is the way to do it, but it's still not enough. He's going to get you.
Mahomes has had, let's not overreact here. Mahomes has had less than stellar games against New England a couple times, against the Chargers a couple years ago. The Chargers did beat them in 2018. It's not the only time we've ever seen this, but the Chargers did a really nice job. Plus, there were plays where just the whole time the Chiefs are coming back in the fourth quarter, you're just expecting them to throw a touchdown and not, rely on a field goal. And they're covering really well and all that. And just not letting Mahomes have open throws. Also, credit Mahomes' rushing ability. How many times did he just pick up yards on the ground? And I thought last year there was a point where this kind of became a trump card. It's I'm going to defend the Kansas City Chiefs. I can't cover this group of receivers. Even if I do, Mahomes can make special throws. And then, oh, by the way, if I do prevent those 2 things, now he's going to start picking up yards on the ground if I play man coverage, which he showed in the AFC Championship against the Texans. That was 21 yards on 3rd and 20, backbreaker.
That's what always reminded me of Aaron Rodgers with Mahomes.
Yeah.
He's not a special athlete, but he's good enough that if you don't pay attention to it, he can pick up 20 yards and change the game.
And part of it's just knowing when to do it, right? It's just knowing, right? As he becomes more comfortable, he's going to recognize this is man coverage. I have no spy. This is a free 10.
Yeah,
right? And that's what he's gotten good at.
Yeah, it may not even be knowing when to do it. It's just that eventually a team is going to give you that because they have focused so much on everything else. If you turn your back playing man coverage and you are so desperate to stop everything else happening, you give a quarterback that. And if he's a good, it doesn't matter if it's Phillip Rivers, right? Phillip Rivers sees that. Even if it's 20 yards of open space, he realizes that I'm sufficiently statuesque.
I could pick up 4.
Right, that it doesn't matter. I'm going to get 8 yards downfield, and then 5 guys from 40 yards away are going to converge on me, and I'm not picking it up. But Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers and that sort of band of, mobile quarterbacks, but not super athletes, are good enough to pick up those free plays when you give it to them.
Yeah, they're huge. They're extremely valuable plays, obviously. And, again, credit Mahomes in a day where his pocket presence wasn't great, accuracy was a little off, guys were dropping passes, he's under pressure. They still find a way to win in the end. And let's wrap it up. Sunday Night Football. What a game this was. I cannot believe that the Seahawks and Patriots really they've had 3 straight games come down to a play from the 1 yard line. Like, what are the odds of that actually happening? That's insane. And of course, the boss, Chris Collinsworth, Fred Gaudelli, and all those, they were just, I mean, they did all those games anyway, but they were just on point covering all that.
I can't believe that this game got that close.
Me neither.
Like, the Seahawks had it won.
It felt like the Seahawks were going to continue to just run away with it. They have their 3rd and 1, and Russell throws it deep. And
I had this tweet that's like, Russell Wilson is the greatest greatest defensive play in Super Bowl history away from being 4-0 against the Patriots in his career, right? And I had that sitting on my phone for about 25 minutes. Like, I'm like, I can't send it yet. It's not quite done, right? If I send it now, I know that the Patriots will come back and I'll look like an idiot. So I like had it written and then just sat it there next to me. And I was like, oh, they're going to end up losing. Like, somehow, having had this game won for the last half an hour, they're going to end up losing from the 1 yard line because they can't stop Cam Newton. But, I couldn't believe that the Seahawks didn't have that wrapped up in time. Talk about that decision, though, because we were talking about it.
Running it?
Yes. They get to the 1 yard line, and it's like, you haven't been able to stop the Cam Newton mismatch / overload in the goal-to-go situations all game, right? He provides this unique mismatch that no one else in the NFL has, and the Seahawks haven't come close to stopping it all game long. It's one play from the 1 yard line. Everyone knows what's coming, right?
Yeah.
At which point, don't you change what's coming?
If they didn't run the play action off of it, which was an easy touchdown previously, if they hadn't run that already, I think they would have run it, right? So they ran it earlier. Jacoby, the fullback from Germany, runs out into the flat. He's wide open, easy touchdown. And it's like, and Chris is just laughing, right? Chris is just, how do you even stop this thing, right? He's just laughing at it. Because they already ran that, I figured they were going to come back. And here's what makes it so tough to stop. You have 7 offensive linemen. You throw 2 tight ends out there in wings, and you throw the fullback right next to Cam. And you can run it either way. You don't know where it's going. It's a power play, so you're blocking down with all those linemen, and you're pulling a guard around. So I texted my buddy who's, he's a diehard Pats fan. He's always texting me during the game. I was like, they're going to run Cam, and you pull Shaq. And that, I think they just went like, this is our bread and butter, right? We got to execute it. Shaq Mason, we're going to follow him on the pull, and we're going to go. And Seattle just completely sold out.
Yeah.
And boy, the football world would have been turned upside down if all he did was take a step back, flip it to the fullback again.
Or even not even the fullback, the classic like Tebow fake or dive into the line and then just dink it over the top.
They must. I mean, they don't have only one play action off of that. Sure. They have another one to use. But this was Tecmo Bowl, right? Because in that formation, you probably have 4 plays. You have power left, power right, and 2 play actions. And Seattle picked the play. They picked the Tecmo Bowl play, which was power left, and they sold out. They blew up the fullback. LJ Collier, justifies his first-round pick status with the tackle. It was an incredible play. It was an incredible football game. Russell Wilson has been just lights out, obviously.
This always it sort of reminds me a bit of like in soccer, like a penalty shootout.
You get a guess.
Yeah. Well, so if you've got like three penalties have gone to the right, the same side. Now it's this game of like mental cat and mouse, right? What do you do? Does the keeper keep going to that side because they've got to come back eventually? Like if you've dived the wrong way 3 straight times and the ball's just sailed into the like, crap. Like I don't want to go the other side because they're just going to put it this side. It's been 3 straight times. Yeah. This was like that, right? They've just every single time the Patriots have just driven it right up over them and Cam Newton's walked in. Like, do you sell out against it now, or do you say, well, this is the perfect time to sucker us into that and just dink it over the top with a little Tebow jump pass?
Oh man, yeah, they could have had it. I think they absolutely could have had it. Seattle it was Tecmo Bowl, man. They picked the right play. I mean, first let's go to Cam while we're talking Pats offense, right? I thought that the offense was very controlled early on. It's just we only want to throw when we need to. We'll make some throw some outside lane passes that Cam excels on. Throws with incredible zip, but boy, did he throw some dimes last night. They were using Edelman as a vertical threat up the seam. Cam was getting him the ball. I mean, that was
drop touchdown. Should have won the game.
And the touchdown went through his hands, right? He did put it on. Newton played just a fantastic game. He had 2 bad throws, really. Both of them are the same thing. He left an out route in. One should have been a pick 6, probably. It was the same pass Brady threw last week for a pick 6.
Yeah.
And then another one that actually did get picked by Quentin Dunbar. Other than that, a little high on a couple throws, but dude, he was on point. And just, I think when you watch, arm strength's definitely overrated, but there are so many plays when you watch over the course of a Sunday where it's like, man, the zip that Newton has, or that Mahomes or Herbert had, or what, that does come into play, and it does help. And I thought Newton just looked so good from an arm strength standpoint, and just creating some big plays in that offense. I mean,
there's certain plays that you can make when you have arm strength that you can't make if you don't, right? It doesn't mean that you're inherently going to be better, or that it's not the be all and end all, but it does mean stylistically there are things you can do that the other guy can't.
Right.
And yeah, that was as good as for as much as week 1 was a little bit of an overreaction. 1, it was Miami. 2, it was this insane run heavy offense. You didn't actually need to pass all that much. This was way more balanced, and he was way more, there was way more asked of him in terms of passing, and he answered it pretty well. This was as good as Cam Newton has looked in a long, long time, even considering the bad out route, a couple of those shots. Those were bad plays. One of them got punished.
But he only had a handful.
But despite those 2, he still played really quite well.
I mean, Seattle too, game plan wise. Here's what's interesting: they've adjusted their defense to Jamal Adams. This is not your old school, just here's your cover 3 defense. They're using him in and around the line of scrimmage. They're using him as a blitzer. But then they also had him covering Julian Edelman, and that was a disaster. So as great as Jamal Adams is,
they still don't have a slot that they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Now, I know they were missing, they got guys who were going,
and they were banged up and everything. Have to talk about Wilson. He's right up there with Aaron Rodgers in this MVP debate. I think it's got to be those 2 right now. Let's not debate MVP every week, please. They're just playing really good football.
I didn't talk about it.
They're playing really good football. The deep
up.
ball to DK Metcalf, who just he was torching Stephon Gilmore, who's awesome. The Tyler Lockett connection, David Moore's catch along the sideline was just ridiculous. That trio, Metcalf, Lockett, and Moore, that doesn't look crazy on paper. They've been fantastic. And I think the scary part of all this is Brian Schottenheimer's scheming up some easy plays as well. He's scheming up a wide open, there's a wide open drag route for a touchdown to Freddie Swain, So Wilson's making the special plays, plus the scheme has led to a few easy touchdowns on screens and drags the last couple of weeks. That's what makes Seattle really scary here, as they put the ball in Russell Wilson's hands a lot more.
The Metcalf Gilmore battle was really fascinating to watch, because Metcalf wasn't just he went after him from the first snap physically. It's all right, so this is the nothing run blocking assignment that receivers get all the time, and usually doesn't, they just sort of walk up, shadow the guy, right? He was running up there, throwing hands in his face, driving him off the line. It was look, you're going to have to deal with some serious physicality today if you're going to win this matchup. And on the deep touchdown that he got him with, he just, I don't want to say that Gilmore was scared, but he was on the back foot all the way through that game in a way that doesn't usually happen. Gilmore is able to go toe-to-toe with these receivers physically and give as good as he gets, and he wasn't against Metcalf. Metcalf was physically overwhelming him from the first snap of the game on stuff that has nothing to do with catching the ball, so that when the deep shot came, Gilmore is trailing and then tries to get back in and just shucks him off with the one hand once he's caught it. He just physically overwhelmed Gilmore in a way that I don't know if I've ever seen a receiver do that to Gilmore.
I'm just so impressed too with how Seattle's used DK Metcalf. Use him on the vertical routes, the deep overs, deep post. He doesn't have to run the most intricate little dig route or anything like that. They're just using him the right way, which plays perfectly to Russell Wilson's skill set. So Seattle moves to 2-0, and New England, 1-1. They have a tough schedule, but I think you're coming out of that saying all right, this is the defense gave it up a little bit. That's not what you expect from a Belichick team, but this team can maybe be more exciting on offense than you expect. I mean, even halfway through the game, it didn't feel like the most exciting offense until they get into the red zone, right? It feels like this controlled offense. They get into the red zone, they're really tough to stop. But then when they opened it up a little bit, they were even more dangerous. So,
I think this is how healthy Cam Newton stays, right? If they get healthy Cam Newton all the way through the season, healthy Cam Newton within the Patriot structure is really good. And like, that team is going to be tough to stop.
I started thinking, do they want to lock him up? Or are they doing what I said before the season? Are they just saying, we've got 1 year of Cam, like run him 10 to 15 times a game, who cares?
I mean, it's almost the same question. Like, it's if you can anticipate him holding up physically, why wouldn't you lock him up? You're not going to do better. Like, you're not going to find a better version of this guy or a better option out there. This is as good as you're going to get. Like, you're not going to replace a Hall of Famer with a Hall of Famer. So this is your best option. Problem is, he hasn't held up physically for a while. Now, whether those hits have been caused in the pocket or running, it's irrelevant. The fact is he's breaking down or has been breaking down. Now, they patched him together, and apparently this is the first time he's been 100% healthy in a long time. But every time you throw him up the middle on QB power, it's exposing him to a hit that isn't there for most other quarterbacks. So I don't like it's the way you have to play him. Like, this is the way Cam Newton becomes an MVP caliber weapon for you. But I don't know if you can be confident that he's going to last physically.
One more thing to add to this. Seattle's pass rush is a disaster.
I mean, it isn't there. It doesn't exist.
They have...
Jamal Adams is their best pass rusher.
And it's not even close. And you can't just...
And you know who the second one is?
Benson Mayowa?
Bobby Wagner.
Bobby Wagner. Yeah. Well, so they sent Jamal Adams 11 times again, second straight week. They don't like to blitz. They've started to blitz more. Their front foot, that is, if something's going to do them in Seattle, I mean, the pockets were incredible for Cam. And you can't just play cat and mouse with Jamal Adams the entire game unless you just make him a straight up edge rusher. And he's not going to succeed against tackles.
They're not. They're like trying to, that's their pressure packages right now are trying to scheme Jamal Adams and Bobby Wagner against favorable matchups and hope that those guys win because they know for a fact the edge rushers aren't winning.
It works every now and then, a little delayed blitz or whatever by Jamal Adams, great, but man, they got to figure something out there in Seattle. So that'll do it. We got Monday Night Football, Las Vegas Raiders hosting the New Orleans Saints. I just want to see Drew Brees, how the arm handle holds up with no Michael Thomas. How does that affect the offense there? Will Derek Carr drive the ball down the field this week? Every single week. That's all I want to see.
If Drew Brees looks as bad as he did week one, I'm going to be kind of depressed.
You're going to go red light, alarm, alert.
Yeah. I mean, if he looks like that, the Saints can't win a Super Bowl.
All right. So there you have it. Well, they have Steve Young on the bench. You could always put him in there.
2.0.
PFF.com is where you get all the great action once all of the grades are finalized. PSV2, that's Premium Stats 2.0, all a part of your PFF Elite package. Go check it out over at PFF.com. It was good to be back, Sam. Appreciate you having me. There was no small talk today. We'll talk about COVID maybe another day. And
won't that be fun?
The experiences and all that stuff. Whatever. We fought it off. We're done. And I'm back, and we'll be back on Thursday for a Week 3 preview. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.